Career Choices, where you learn about different professions and make informed decisions on your career choices. I'm your host, Yan Chen. When you imagine what you'd like to be when you grow up, it's often a rosy ideal picture. But the path to landing your dream job, just like anything, isn't always smooth. In fact, it may be filled with challenges. The hardships may lead you to rethink your career path. But sometimes, these challenges can also help you to eventually reach your goals. Today's guest has a job that combines his passion with his profession. In his spare time, he also gets involved with activities that may help grow his career. Let's meet the senior partner of Potter Violins, Mr. Dalton Potter. Mr. Potter, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So I understand you have a passion where you love music.
Oh yes, from childhood.
Oh wow. So how did you start or how did you develop that passion in music?
Well, I grew up in the Episcopal Church. So I started out as a chorister and singing church music and being around musicians. And over time, I started focusing more on schoolwork and things like that. But it was like a tsunami coming up behind me. About halfway through high school, I realized that music was really what made me feel whole. And so I started practicing in those days, it was the 1970s, so I started playing guitar. And I started really focusing on jazz and music theory. And that allowed me to get into Berkeley right out of high school, Berkeley College of Music in Boston, which is now a very famous place. In those days, it was not very famous. It had just won its accreditation for a 4-year college. So I was very lucky. I feel like so many times our path ahead of us seems like it's all spaghetti. It's curly-cued and messed up. And then you look behind you and you go, oh, it's a straight line after all, you know.
Yeah, so back then, throughout the years, did you ever think about like what you want to be when you grow up kind of thing? Like, I want to be a singer, I want to play guitar or something. It seems like you have an interest in all different areas.
Yeah, well, I come from a family, most of whom are academics and science people, research people. So, you know, very strong academic background. So anything we did, we were expected to study it and learn about it and, you know, set the parameters. When I was a little kid, of course, it was in the 1960s. And so, you know, every little boy wanted to be either an astronaut or a cowboy. And I have pictures of me with both hats. You know.
Oh, wow.
But the music thing was more of a quiet, growing passion that became something very important. When I was 16 years old, I was sent by the Episcopal Church down to a music camp in Léogâne, which is in Haiti. And they had a small student orchestra there. And for these youngsters, many of whom had birth defects or had problems, you know, Haiti's a very impoverished country, this orchestra was their means of escape. And sometimes literally they allowed them to travel around the world, and they would sometimes, you know, stay in the United States if they were invited. So seeing those children play classical music, you know, was a special moment for me. I was allowed to be a camp counselor there for, I think it was about a week and a half. But that was certainly a seed that got planted very strongly.
Oh, wow. So that's probably when you started to think that you want to get involved in music or doing something.
Yes, yes.
What did you do from there, like actually really either learn more about music or maybe learn an instrument or so?
Well, as I said, I was learning guitar because
Right.
it was the 1970s and I was a teenager, so of course that's probably
Popular.
And I had this background in church music, which is classical music, and I studied classical guitar quite a bit as part of my preparation to go off to music school. But the interesting part was that the idea of getting into making instruments and repairing instruments and doing that was sort of something that sort of took place in secret, where I didn't realize that I was developing these skills because I'm the kid who takes his bicycle apart and puts it back together again, takes the alarm clock apart, puts it back together again, still has parts and it still works. So as a youngster, I didn't have this fear of doing things that I thought were going to help. And so when I got out of music school, I realized very quickly, after having been exposed to some just mind-bogglingly competent professional musicians, that I was not one of them, that I still had a long way to go. And I wound up working in a teaching studio, a music school, if you were, that was owned by a local Maryland jazz guitarist named Charlie Bird. So as a part of just being involved in the day-to-day, they had some instruments that they would rent or they would sell, and they needed somebody to figure out how to make them work correctly. So I started doing hands-on training, you know, inside the store. And one thing led to another, for sure. I never really realized that I was, you know, that these were skills other people didn't have. They just seemed to be the most normal thing in the world, just like, you know, pumping up your tire. But yeah.
Wow, so you learned how to, I guess, it's violin, right? Fixed violin or guitar?
Well, that part of the story is interesting. I had a partner and a friend from the guitar store, from the teaching studio, and he was very, very deeply involved in classical guitar. And through him, I met a number of professional players around the Washington area, and I discovered that there was a level of sensitivity to the acoustic instrument that was much more fascinating to me than electric instruments. And so with him as a partner, I started making classical guitars, and after several years, I was partially self-employed and, you know, doing repair. I was always a hands-on kind of a person. But basically I was delivering some repairs to a local teaching studio, and they said, and I had one of these guitars that I'd built, and they said, "Oh, you got to go next door. There's this guy who just moved in. He's got a violin shop. He'd love to see your work." And I was very proud of it because I'd managed to make all the miters just perfect, and I'd worked very hard. And so he took one look at it, and he asked me if I would like to have a job working part-time, just fixing up inexpensive instruments, so that you know, he would be able to take a more skilled person off of that job and have them do other things. And that was 1980. Fellow's name was Bill Weaver, and he'd had a violin shop in his family since the 1880s. He was the third generation. And so it turned out to be a full-time job and a full-time passion, and it became my career eventually. But it was an interesting, you know, switch over, because the same realization of the sensitivity of acoustic instruments to just little things, changes in the pressure of the bow and how the fingerings are done, was something that could be controlled. It wasn't just this random, oh, well, here's a violin and it might be good or it might be bad. There were specific qualities to the wood and to the, you know, the way the instrument was set up that could actually make a difference in terms of whether somebody could actually express themselves with it or not.
So you must have very good, I guess, hearing or sensitivity to different tunes. Otherwise, I guess it will be hard.
Yeah, well, it is true that in my career I've run across a number of people who want to be good violin makers, but they don't play themselves, and then they're dependent upon somebody else to help them adjust it. And I always have felt that they're at a little bit of a disadvantage, although there are some fabulous makers that don't play a note. And you know, there's ways around it. You know, if you're determined, there's
That's
ways
right.
around anything.
So other than that good sensitivity to the music, is there anything else you really need to like get into, like making violin?
Well, like so many pursuits in life, the most important part is that you have to have a dream. You have to have a vision. And always, for me, the music and the violin and the things I was doing were a means to an end. So I would like to say, for me personally, I have more than one career. So my career is really helping other people, teaching other people to dream, and teaching other people to become better tomorrow than they are today. And the violin shop and what I do with instruments and all that, that's a vehicle that allows me to do that.
As a matter of fact, that's our theme for today, and we want to touch upon that a little bit more later, too.
Okay.
I want to ask one question about pursuing a career in art, music, because I know that a lot of parents probably will think that you can't make money out of that, so may discourage you. So, your experience?
I have a number of things to say about that. So the thing to understand is that you can become successful at anything that you choose to become successful at. Now, it might not look the way you thought it was going to when you get there. So learning to recognize that you've actually succeeded sometimes is hard for people. But for parents who feel that pursuing music as a career might be something they would try to discourage their children from, I would say the children are going to sort themselves out on that. Because music is one of those pursuits where, especially classical music, where there's an orchestra, but pop music as well. The audience and the buying public determine your success. And at some point you have to have your plan B. So if you're going to go and you're going to develop skills as a musician, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're necessarily going to go out and try to earn a living as a musician, but the sheer pursuit of personal excellence in following the path that somebody else has laid down before you, becoming better at playing scales, becoming better at playing a Bach concert or a Beethoven symphony. That very pursuit, that activity in and of itself is a goal that's worth attaining because it allows you to develop skills like, we're going to have delayed gratification. We're going to start this piece of work here and it's not going to be finished for several months. And children today, you know, they see something on television and in 30 minutes the problem is solved. And so this level of activity is really something that's important that people learn how to develop.
Let's keep that thought in mind because I'm going to ask you later, see whether you think you're successful in pursuing your dream. Let's take a break and we'll be right back.
Can you consent with me? Imagine what you'd see if every child had a book to read. So the mission is for us to get a book to each and every child. So let's join hands, book people unite, unearth hidden passion. Come on, we'll have a good time. One book could be the first element, helps to change a life. Book people unite.
Read to a child today and spark a lifetime of ambition.
Up, college is hard. Down, those books are heavy.
My sport is football, but my passion is education.
Right up here.
So every year I take promising high schoolers on a college tour
Lights there, darts there.
to show them that higher education means a brighter future. My name is Nnamdi Asamoah. I don't just wear the shirt, I live it.
You can be a reader, tutor, or mentor too. Take the pledge at liveunited.org/volunteer.
Do you wear this?
Welcome back to Career Choices. In today's program, we invited Mr. Dalton Potter. He is the senior partner of Potter Violins. So, Mr. Potter, we talked about your dream, and actually before that, you mentioned that you learned how to fix violins, and now you are the senior partner and the president of Potter Violins. Tell us, how do you get from fixing violin to become a president of the company?
That's a good question. And I would say that almost everybody who goes to work for a small business always thinks that they could do it better. And I was no different. And it's been an education. I always had a goal of being self-employed. I feel that the United States as a country and as a culture has opportunities available for people who are willing to work hard, and I did and still do. And that just being able to be in control of the decisions that allow a company to grow or fail on its own merits, I felt that I really wanted to have a company and to prove to the world that nice guys can win. That you don't have to take advantage of people, that you don't have to, be secretive about your business practices, that Everything can be out in the open. And my clientele has rewarded that. We've gone from being 2 or 3 people back in 1996 when I founded the company to 24, 25 people now. And we do a lot of business nationwide, Maryland to California and Texas to Minnesota.
Pretty much nationwide.
Yeah, we rent 3,000 instruments a year, and we probably sell around 1,600 instruments a year, and that would be including all sizes and basses, cellos, violins, violas. So it's very comprehensive. What we don't do is we don't teach lessons. We let the teaching community support us, and we don't want to compete with them, of course. But as a person who, it wasn't that I wanted to be the big cheese. What I really wanted to do is make sure that everything was done correctly, so that if a teacher was going to recommend a student to come and see us and get a violin from us, that they knew that their student was going to be treated correctly. They weren't going to be taken advantage of. There's so many people in that are exposed to the violin world, and the first thing they worry about is, I don't know anything. How am I supposed to know whether I'm getting a good deal? How am I supposed to know anything? And so being very open and having everything published and all of these policies that we put into place, really, it's been nothing but grow since 1996 when I started the company. And now we have a partner that is Jim Kelly, is the vice president. Very talented guy. He plays in a number of orchestras around town. And we were lucky enough to acquire the old Blair Mansion Inn and renovate it. And we moved from Bethesda into that location. So now we have our own parking lot. We have a performance space that is literally, it's the beating heart of this business. It makes it so that you walk in and wow, there's somebody doing a performance down the hall, and there's 100 seats available in there. So it's almost like a dream come true, except for I'm not done yet.
I was going to ask that question. Do you feel like you have achieved your goal, made your dream?
Well, as I said, you have to be willing for it not to look like you thought it would when you get there. But certainly some things that I had set out to do, I've more than achieved. But the goal of creating an atmosphere, a contagious culture of self-realization and self-improvement and a dedication to excellence is one that never goes away. And in the classical music world, is a parallel to making violins. If you see a performance, you go to the concert and there's an orchestra there, you're seeing hundreds of, if not thousands of hours of human effort, all in that one little tiny time frame. Because all of the people who practiced enough to be able to audition and get into the orchestra seat, and all of the people who worked hard to learn how to make violins, all the people who adjusted the violins, all the people who made the bows, it's all coming together, whoop, into this little tiny moment in time. And all of those people are people who want to be better tomorrow than they were today, because it's the only way that they can achieve that level of aspiring excellence that we are all dedicated to.
Sorry.
That's
I
all
want
right.
to talk about a little bit about your other activities. Let's talk about with respect to classical music. I understand that besides the shop, actually you also help with a lot of, I guess, concerts and performances and the TV programs. So can you talk all about that?
Okay. So I'm lucky enough to have met some good friends in the television business, and they produce a program for me. We sort of brainstormed it at a pool party a couple of years ago, where we would have essentially an open mic for young aspiring classical musicians, mostly string players, although I hope we'll broaden it out into keyboards and some other things. But basically the idea is it's classical music for kids by kids, to make them realize that this is something they can do, that it's not scary, it's not hard, they just have to want to do it and be focused on it. The other thing that I do is I do give away a lot. It's almost like I'm being selfish by being so generous. We donate a number of instruments every year to students where their teachers have said, well, they're struggling, they've made it this far, but they need to get here and they can't with the instrument they have. So we come in and we donate an instrument, and that allows them to progress in ways that they otherwise might not have. So I'm very, very proud of that. I actually had somebody come to me and tell me they got into college as a result of joining a student orchestra because of the instrument that they got.
That's wonderful.
So that really makes your heart feel like you're doing something real.
Yes.
You know.
That's right. So you mentioned about singing, jazz guitar, and a whole bunch of
Oh,
other things.
yeah.
Tell us about some other activities in that area.
Well,
Fun stuff, right?
yeah, fun stuff. Well, you know, everybody has to have their own outlet. And what we like to say in the violin trade is that if you're going to be a classical musician, a string player, violinist, it takes a whole lifetime. And it takes
Yes.
another lifetime to learn how to be a good violin maker. So we're like two trees that grow in the forest. We need each other. I don't have a whole lifetime to become a musician of that caliber in classical music. So I continued to work in jazz. I also host an open mic under the auspices of the Songwriters Association of Washington. And that brings people who are trying to learn how to write songs for their own enjoyment and possibly for sale to bring them before the public. I do a little bit of playing myself. I have a jazz trio that I play
Oh,
with, and I
wow.
play in a rock band once in a while too. So in fact, yesterday was a big day for us. So we opened the Chrysalis Theater out in at Merriweather Post Pavilion.
nice.
So that was a big show.
So how often do you play with band?
A couple times a month.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Do you perform?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's very nice.
But we try. It's a type of music that would, if history started in 1960, then this would be classical music for the baby boomers. So
Yes.
the Grateful Dead were a very famous rock band, and they did something that other bands don't do, which is they would improvise live music on stage, just like jazz people do. And other rock bands, they basically play the song, there's a solo, and then that's it. This is what we sell, this is our song. And the Grateful Dead are a culture of improvisation and live performance that I find very, very rewarding.
That's great. So, throughout the career or development of your business, what do you find to be the most challenging thing for you?
It's always the people skills. Okay, so you can learn any kind of hard skill, how to sharpen a chisel, how to cut a bridge or fit a sound post inside a violin, put strings on. That's stuff that are hard skills that you can learn easily. The soft skills, the people skills, are the ones that present the most challenge. And mostly because I'm a very optimistic person. So I tend to believe people, I tend to look at what somebody can be instead of what they actually are. So on occasion I've hired people to come work for me in the shop that I was seeing where they wanted to be and where they could be as opposed to where they were. And so over time I've learned that, you know, maybe we don't have time to wait for them to grow into that we need people that are professionals at a professional level right now, and other people can come along afterwards. But definitely, you know, learning your limits. Getting sleep.
Yes, that's probably another question because it's something like you do your business and you yourself actually, I know, repair and make violins too.
Yes, I do.
And the concerts support different things.
Yeah.
Do you
Well,
really get to sleep?
I'm learning to pace myself. I do get to sleep. I'm learning to pace myself.
Oh,
And
that's
one of the secrets to having a successful company is learning to recognize talent in other people, and that they're aspiring, they want to be better, and to get out of their way and let them just become who they're going to be. And truthfully, the Potter Violin Company, which is now Potter Violins, couldn't be what it is today if it wasn't for me saying, okay, you do that, I'm going to go over here and do this because you obviously have this under control. And even though they might not do it exactly the way I want or the way I would have done it, often they do it better than I would have because they have skills that I don't have.
Wow.
And it's hard to learn that one.
Okay, we have about like 30 seconds.
Okay.
So I want to ask you a question, very important, because if you want to give advice to people who would like to pursue their dream in music, what would you tell them?
Never quit.
Very important.
Very important. Never quit. It's never, you know, the road is not straight. It has potholes and turns, but if you have a vision and you can attach emotion to that vision, it will draw you towards it. And you just have to be willing to recognize that you're making progress every single day. You already have most of what you need anyway. But it's such a pleasure to be able to bring that to other people, you know. And in my life, I get to do it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
You did a lot for the community. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
This concludes today's program. Thanks to our guest, Mr. Dalton Potter, and thank you for joining us. If you have any feedback or comments, or if you would like to share your experience, please email us at qip.career.choices@gmail.com. We will see you next time on Career Choices.